LSU, and we have a really good episode. We've got at least 16 draft-eligible players from LSU. But before we get started, Noah, it is your first Draft Professor podcast. How are you doing this afternoon?
No, I'm doing well. I appreciate you guys having me on to talk some ball.
Absolutely. So, Dale, anything going on with the teacher off season and the summer scouting? Anything of note?
I mean, it's July. It'll fly by, and school will be back in, and normal schedule back on, and won't be able to do this at 9:00 on Monday nights. But other than that, still be putting out a bunch of draft content, a bunch of Bengals content, and having a good time talking football.
Target's already stocking the aisles for back to school already.
Yeah, of course.
So, David, when does training camp begin for you?
July 22nd, next Tuesday.
Nice. And then, Owen, when do master's classes resume?
Late August, right about the same time that coaching picks up in full swing when our season starts is right when my classes start back up. So perfect timing for that. It's going to be quite a juggle.
Yep. And we have Pork Chop here, who is one of Dale's loyal followers, huge LSU fan. Noah, do you want to kick us off for the first player we're going to cover?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's no surprise who's going to come up first is the guy you're going to hear his name called first on draft night when it comes to this LSU roster, and it's quarterback Garrett Nussmeier. I think there were some expectations last year for him to be a guy that maybe went into last year's draft, makes the decision to come back to LSU for his fifth year, and the expectations are about as high as they can get. When you're talking about a quarterback. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of discussion around year two for LSU quarterbacks. And when you look back to 2019 with Burrow, that was his second season as a starter. You look at 23 with Jaden Daniels, that was his second year as a starter. So just from recency bias, I guess you could say, people have very high expectations just from the point of a second season starting at LSU. But I think the biggest thing for him is he's going to get his first real offseason of sitting down, being able to break down film, and actually watch himself throughout a full season of SEC football rather than just the bowl game against Wisconsin or spot plays here and there throughout different years. Now he has a full season against Alabama, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Florida, USC, some of the best competition you can find where he can really sit down, dissect it, and pick what he needs to work on. And I think that starts with his decision-making. I don't think that's any surprise that that's going to be the first thing when you talk about a concern standpoint for Nussmeier, is that his decision-making is the biggest question mark. In my notes, I put down that his arm is special. I remember the first one of my first years covering LSU, I think it was the third year I was covering the team, was his freshman season. So we were out at practice watching TJ Finley and Max Johnson and Miles Brennan throw. And then here comes this hotshot freshman with all the arm talent in the world. Like, I looked back at some of my guys, I was like, timeout. Did we just see him throw the ball like that? Because from a mechanics standpoint, he's got such a smooth throwing motion, and it's been special since he's been at LSU. And he can make every single throw on the field. It just kind of comes down to knowing when to make every single throw on the field. And that was the biggest knock against him after last season.
So, Owen, was this your first look at Nussmeier?
It was. I had some people watch him last year and talk to me about him. I never ended up throwing his tape on. I kind of expected, and I was pretty sure it was pretty earlier on in the season that he kind of came out and said he wanted to return for his senior season there at LSU. So I didn't end up taking the time last season to check him out. So this was my first look at him. And compared to the quarterbacks I've watched up to this point, now, again, we're going to be doing Texas in a few episodes or within a few episodes. So I haven't gotten to Arch Manning yet. But for right now, he's QB1 for me compared to the other guys I've watched so far. I liked exactly what you said. I loved his arm mechanics. I liked a lot of his sense as it comes to working within the structure of the offense and being a quarterback in that LSU offense. He operated really well. The problems where I saw it was when he was asked to play off schedule and off script and then being forced to getting pressed to make those correct decisions and utilize some arm talent where I don't think he has the strongest arm in the world. I think he maybe overestimates it a little bit, and he misses some of the underneath coverages when he gets that pressure put on him. So he has some mental screws to kind of like really bolt down there. But other than that, I think he is someone who, if you have a clean pocket and you're asking him to execute some offenses, some half field reads, process through and go to find his check down, I think you'll find a lot what you like. So I think he has a higher floor when it comes to starting earlier on, especially compared to like a guy like Aiden Childs we covered earlier, who has all the physical talent in the world, but right now is way further off than Nussmeier to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. So I think you have the dichotomy there of lower ceiling because I think he's lacking maybe the athletic ability or arm strength purely that Childs has, but is a lot better when it comes to processing and just needs to really hone in on working under pressure and making those decisions.
David, how about you on Nussmeier?
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I mean, he does bring a little bit of that gunslinger DNA and a fearless mindset, and that volatility sometimes outweighs the command and decision making, but he flashes NFL arm talent, ball placement and pocket maturity will improve. His arm mechanics and ability to make every throw on the field outweighs any negative that I've seen. If he strings together a clean 2025, he's taken a major leap and going to be one of the first people that you hear on draft night.
And then Dale.
Yeah, so entering redshirt senior season, he had to wait behind Jaden Daniels, as was mentioned earlier, for a couple seasons and some other guys. I think he's pretty accurate, especially in the intermediate area. I think he could get a little better with his deep ball accuracy, and that's something I imagine will take a step forward this season. Obviously, tons of weapons for him to throw to. Anticipation is something that I think is just elite at. Guys want him to be out of their breaks, and he's throwing to where they're going to be. And there's just multiple examples of that. One, Aaron Anderson, a touchdown against Ole Miss, stood out to me when watching him. There was some other throws to Kyron Lacey last season, similar type stuff. So I love the anticipation. High football IQ. His dad is Doug Nussmeier, who's the offense coordinator for the Saints. So he comes from a football type of family, something he's worked on. You know, obviously his dad knows quarterbacks and has worked with him as well. Pretty accurate overall, too, like 64% accuracy. I think that could take another tick up again this season. I do wonder, like Durst was talking about there in the chat, about 6'1", you know, not quite 6'1", 204 is what the official is. I had him at 6'2", 200. Either way, it is something to note. He's not the biggest quarterback, doesn't have that prototype size, but I don't think it's anything that hurts him because he's got the strong arm, got the anticipation. His feet are a little jumpy, but he can reset and still deliver the ball just fine with that arm strength. So I don't have a lot of worries there. I do. My only question, I guess, is LSU has kind of a fairly young offensive line this season. So I just want to see how that line does and how he does behind that line. But he still was pressured a lot, even though they had a lot of NFL talent on the offensive line last year. And he is also my quarterback one right now.
Okay. And we're going to give some love to the offensive line because the next player we're going to cover is Josh Thompson. I'm going to label offensive line. I think we listed him as a guard. I think, Owen, you made a comment about offensive tackle. But Josh Thompson, one of your parents retweeted the podcast that bumps you right up to number 2 on the list. But Noah, what do you want to tell us?
Yeah, look, I mean, Josh Thompson's somebody that I haven't seen a whole lot of just yet. He was a late arrival to spring practice this last spring because he was wrapping some school stuff up at Northwestern. But he is a transfer in, an all Big Ten honorable mention offensive lineman, his redshirt junior season. And like Dale said, this is a very young offensive line for LSU when you think of the experience that they had on the line last season with guys like Will Campbell, Emory Jones, Miles Frazier, Garrett Dellinger. Those were guys that had played, 3-4 seasons up to that point and played a whole lot of football and didn't really give the opportunity to the guys that are now going to step up to really get much run. So before they went out and got Thompson out of the portal, you were looking at an offensive line that was going to be full of redshirt sophomores, redshirt freshmen, and true freshmen for LSU, which obviously with your passing game and your quarterback being the calling card of your team, you wouldn't be able to protect them. And so they went out and they got 2 offensive linemen, but Josh Thompson was the big get He was a huge, huge win for them, and to me was a surprise. I did not expect him to be an LSU Tiger. It seemed like everything from a transfer portal perspective was kind of going towards him ending up at Tennessee. Well, he ends up signing with LSU, and it was a massive win because he's a guy that can come in. He didn't, like I said, didn't do a lot during the spring because he got there late. But I expect when we get out there in the first couple of weeks of August for fall camp to see him on that starting five, because he is one of your 5 best offensive linemen. But the question mark is, where are they going to put him? And I think his versatility is one of his best attributes, but also it's going to be interesting to see where he ends up at LSU. My guess would be he ends up at guard. I think that they really like two of the 2 guys they have at tackle that are kind of younger. So I would assume that Thompson ends up at guard, but he has shown the ability to play right tackle. But he played a good bit of guard last season at Northwestern. And I just think for LSU, that's probably where they'll stick him. But I expect him to be really, really good for LSU. And he's one of the most experienced guys on that line. And I think will kind of be the highlighted name when you talk about the offensive line for LSU.
So, David, how about you? What are you hearing on Josh Thompson?
Yeah, like Noah said, he's a Northwestern transfer. He's a steady presence there on the interior, playing with leverage, sound technique. He's bringing experience to an O-line that desperately needed one. He arrived late, but from what I've been told when I was doing the research for this, he's already won over most of the OL coaches in the film room, if not all of them. And I am looking forward to watching him ascend this season. I think he's going to be a big difference maker on that O-line and be quickly becoming best friends with Garrett.
Dale, how about you? What do you have on Josh Thompson?
Yeah, so I have him listed at 6'5", 301, which may support him sticking at guard at the next level if that's what he ends up being size-wise while he's at LSU. He didn't allow a sack at all at Northwestern last year. Only 8 total pressures, so you love to see those numbers. I know they had a pretty mobile quarterback, and sometimes that can play into that as well. So it'll be interesting to see with Nussmeier, who stays in the pocket a little bit more. He's played both guard spots and tackle, so he has the versatility. He blocks really well on the move, which I think is a good bonus for him. He had an 80.3 pass block grade last year. There's some issues with strike timing and hand placement and sustaining his blocks, but overall I think he's going to be that veteran guy that they have on the line. And, yeah, all signs was pointing toward Tennessee, and LSU snagged him at the last minute. And I think he's most likely to be one of the starting guards. And I've got him as like a 4th, 5th round guy now. But if he shows that he can, play really well in the SEC and protect Nussmeier instead of the Northwestern mobile quarterback that was running a lot, I think that'll really boost his draft stock.
And Owen, you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, so I have his snap splits here just to get it clear because I was the one who mentioned in our chat about tackle. So back in 2023, he played 749 snaps at right tackle and then 665 snaps at right guard this past season. For me, I have a day 2 grade on him. He's really sound fundamentally when it comes to technique, especially with his footwork. He's really light in his feet, but can also drop down his lowers and anchor down. I never saw any issues with his anchor, despite him being a guy who's hovering around 300 pounds as an interior blocker. I don't think he's a people mover per se. I think he's more of a neutralizer, but I do think he's able to handle power on the interior well enough. And he was going I watched the games against Ohio State and some of these other teams that had like impact in interior blockers. And then when I went back and watched the game where he did play right tackle, I watched him against Duke, where Aeneas Peebles was on that team, Dwayne Carter, guys who were draftable players. And he held up pretty well. I think when he was at tackle, you could definitely see he was a bit younger. And like how Dale was saying, his strike time with his hands were off. He wasn't really marrying his feet to his hands as much. You can definitely see some progression there as he's moved inside and played his next season. I think another area where he can really improve for me is going to be with his ability to kind of pick up stunts, blitzes, and react better with that. I do think also there was probably some stuff with his quarterback being more spotty and when it becomes being mobile and running around and not really being able to track him behind himself. So there were some plays where the coverage and by the all line in general was kind of messy. But having gotten some insight from my time over at UB, because my former DPP was in one of the scouting analytic people at Northwestern for a good little bit, he was telling me a lot about how they are the reason Northwestern, despite being the Big Ten, is one of the more lowly looked at programs is because they have such high academic standards. So you're having a guy who was able to stick and stay in Northwestern with such high academic requirements, and now he's coming over to LSU where he's going to be able to adjust really quickly, have that high intelligence from his time in Northwestern, and already be technically sound. I think for me, what another thing that could really boost him would be if they are able to get him some play at right tackle. Being 6'5", 305, you'd like your interior blockers to be closer to that 315, 320 range. So the fact that he's 6'5", which is not a bad height for a tackle, and has on the lighter side when it comes to his weight, I would like to see maybe if he can move there, especially with how good his movement skills are laterally at guard. And if not, I think he's already got the floor of being a guy who could be an eventual developmental starter as a wide zone blocking guard in the NFL. So I think he has a high floor, and there's some potential there when it comes to playing around in different spots of the line and him just developing more as a starter.
Awesome. So there's 3 wide receivers that we want to cover: Nick Anderson, Barry Brown, and Aaron Anderson. And ironically, we did a wide receiver big board yesterday. One of them had Nick Anderson higher. One of them had Aaron Anderson higher. Noah, what do you want to tell us about the LSU wide receivers?
Yeah, look, I mean, this is probably the most talented position group at LSU. It is extremely talented. You talk about the speed that they have. Aaron Anderson is a guy that became one of Garrett Nussmeier's favorite targets last season after really not playing all that much, having some injury things here and there his first year at LSU in 23. And obviously being behind Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas doesn't help. But last season, he gets his opportunity as essentially wide receiver 2 because Lacey was the guy slated as wide receiver 1 for LSU, and he took full advantage of it. Aaron Anderson is a guy that I do cover some high school football around the state as well, and he's probably the second best high school football player I've ever witnessed with my own 2 eyes, behind Derek Stingley Jr. Here in the local area. I mean, Aaron Anderson at Edna Carr was absolutely unbelievable. But he showed last season that he's not just a return man, that he's a legitimate wide receiver, and has a pretty good route tree, is really dynamic in the middle of the field. You talk about that the play against Ole Miss that Nussmeier showed the really good anticipation. I mean, that's where Aaron Anderson is dangerous, right there over the middle of the field. But then he makes a catch like that over the middle field against Texas A&M, and then houses it for 76 yards, showing off that speed he has. He's just electric with the ball in his hands. And I think Aaron Anderson is somebody that, as much as his size can kind of be a concern because he's not the biggest wide receiver, he looks more like a return man. He's 5'8", 184, the measurables I have. He's absolutely dynamic with the ball in his hands. But to me, he is more of a receiver than a return specialist, even though that they are both very real skills that he possesses.
So, Dale, do you want to tell us what you have on the 3 LSU wide receivers?
So the one I have the highest right now, and it's probably just pure projection because he didn't even hardly play last year with injury, but that's Nick Anderson, transfer from Oklahoma. I guess I'm a sucker for the size. He's 6'4", 219. Impressive catch radius, good straight line speed for his size. He can make guys miss, but I wouldn't say that's a strength of his necessarily, but he can do it at times. And in 2023, he had 21 yards per reception. So I just love that. He's a deep threat at any time. I think he's got potential to be a top 50 player, but he's got to get better. With that size, his contested catch rate in 2023 was only 3 for 12, 25%. It's got to be better for a guy that's 6'4", 219. So that's something I'm hoping improves this year. But mainly he has to stay healthy after missing basically all of 2024. I think he played a few snaps and was injured, and that was pretty much it for his season. So I like Nick Anderson a lot. Barry Brown, 6'1", 174. I have a little bit of concern about his durability anytime a guy's that light, but good lateral agility, burst, an excellent return man. It's hard to knock him coming from Kentucky because his production wasn't good, but their quarterback play was just awful last year. So him and Dane Key both transferred out. Key went to Nebraska, Brown to LSU. So I expect him to have a bounce-back season. And then Aaron Anderson was a little late on my radar. but he's 5'8". Yes, the height's a little bit of an issue, but he's built well. Like you said, I think you had him at 184. I got 180. He's somewhere in that range, 185 at 5'8". He's still pretty well built. Good returner, excellent speed, good route runner, had 884 yards, 5 touchdowns last year. He can play on the outside. He does his best work in the slot. I mean, he's feisty. He plays a lot bigger than that 5'8" too. He will fight for catches at the catch point and does a lot of things really well. He's a redshirt junior this season, so maybe he won't even be in this class, but I expect another big season from him with Nussmeier. And it's we'll see if Anderson or Brown kind of take away from his targets. I know Xavier Thomas is still there. Who's the other guy that's there?
Chris Hilton.
Chris Hilton. I mean, there's so many wide receivers, so we'll see how that goes. But I do expect him to still get a lot of targets. He's got the chemistry with Nussmeier. He's not a transfer. He's a guy who was there last year, so I expect that to carry over again.
So, what do you have on the LSU wide receivers?
Yeah, so this is where I'm going to get a little hot takey, I guess. So, first off, to avoid that part, I do have Aaron Anderson as my number 1 receiver there, I think. He's a dynamic playmaker, kind of like what Noah hit on a lot of. He's good with the ball after the catch. I think he can still improve there with some of his vision and ability to make guys miss more so than just beating out angles. And I also like the bit that he was able just willingly to drop his shoulder and run through guys, even though he's a smaller player. So he's not always looking to just bounce it and take negative plays when he can get some extra yardage here or there. So I really did like that. I thought he was a decent route runner out of the slot. I don't really see him. He did play a little bit on the outside, but I don't really see that being a big part of his future projection to the NFL. But as a guy who brings some of that kind of explosiveness to the LSU offense and someone who was there last year with Nussmeier and really popped in games like against Texas A&M. I watched some of the game against Ole Miss, like you were saying with the touchdown throw with Nussmeier. He had couple games where it was obvious that he was one of the guys that Nuss really trusted. So he was my number 1 guy. And then I also have some high upside for Baron Brown, kind of like Dale was talking about. I think he and Anderson are going to play off each other a little differently than I think most teams would, because with Anderson, I didn't see a lot of – I don't think they really liked getting him into the gimmick or design touches as much. They liked him being utilized more as a traditional slot receiver who can go out there and run routes and win. Whereas Brown, at his time in Kentucky – he was oftentimes the tunnel screen guy being used a lot in that gimmick touch just to get the ball in his hands because he is also an electric guy after the catch. So LSU bringing him in, they may feed into each other's touches because they are kind of similar with their size and wanting to play on the inside. But for me, I think Brown is much more going to be taking that role of gimmick touches or some of that more screen-oriented game than LSU might want to run with that instead of having its funnel to Anderson and make him pigeonholed there. But for me, the interesting part and where I get a little hot takey is when it comes to Nick Anderson and then also Chris Hilton, who we talked about a little bit. For me, with Nick Anderson, he didn't play much last year. He played 9 snaps against Tennessee and then pulled up with, I think it was like a lower leg injury. I think it was something like hamstring or some other kind of soft tissue. The way the play looked, it just looked like he stepped wrong and they kind of knocked him out for the whole season. I do like the size. The contested catch situation is a bit rough, but also I think when I watched all 14 of those contested catches that PFF has him down for. And most of, not all of them, were he's more considered a contested catch because he was in traffic and Dylan Gabriel was putting it into his chest and he had to make it over the middle and absorb contact, as opposed to having Dylan Gabriel put it up for him going and climbing the ladder and getting up top and utilizing all that 6'4" to go up and get it. So I think he is someone who has some upside when it comes to contested catches and showing that when moving to LSU, because Nussmeier can show off some of that accuracy, some of that touch and timing, and put him in positions to be able to use his size and length to get in more contested catch situations that will benefit him more so than what he was getting with Dylan Gabriel in Oklahoma. But outside of that, I didn't really love his speed. He did have some good big plays down the field, but a lot of those times it was him winning with some routes, or the cornerback playing the route wrong, and he was able to get some separation downfield because of that. And when he did get the ball, he had to win after the catch by out-muscling guys or just being a hard nose for the football with going upfield as opposed to running away from those defenders. So, and in the short to intermediate area, I didn't see a ton of explosiveness in and out of his cuts. He got jammed up and mugged a lot, even in those 9 snaps against Tennessee, like 6 or 7 of those reps that were kind of rough to watch. So I think for a guy who has size and you want to be more so just go run down the field and be a contested catch guy, kind of like Durst says, comping him to Mike Williams, I can see that being projected. And with a better quarterback and Nussmeier at LSU, I can definitely see him fully achieving that. But for what I saw at Oklahoma, I was a bit underwhelmed. But for me, what the player I was super excited to watch, and not because they're overly dynamic or anything like that, was Chris Hilton. He's 6 foot 190. He's going to be a 5-year senior after this season. I watched 3 games from him, and a lot of it was he was doing some of the more the dirty work plays. He was blocking, running a lot of those clear out routes. He has some speed to take the field, push down the field, and a lot of what he was asked to do in the offense last year with Lacey and Aaron Anderson was be the guy on those deep posts, drag a safety, and open up the tight end on a delayed release, or be the guy who attracts the attention down the field and just run 40, 50 yards, full sprint, take the coverage off the top and allow the underneath stuff to open up. So for me, we're seeing a guy who is still 6 foot, pushing 180, 190, that range, is going to be willing to do some of that hard working stuff, has some good footwork off the line of scrimmage with his release, has some speed and explosiveness in and out of his cuts. Not something that's super crazy. I don't think he's an amazing run after the catch player, but someone who will do the hard work and still has doesn't give up anything when it comes to size and has some juice. He's someone that you can draft on day 3, and I really like him sticking around as like your wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, and we'll see if he can progress in his role this season.
David, what do you have in the LSU wide receivers?
I guess to not be redundant, I talk about the one that I'm excited for is Berrien Brown. I think he adds a dimension that's going to put a lot of extra pressure on defenses. Dude is like a Ferrari in open space. He is electric with the ball in his hands as a kick returner or on the screen threat or a vertical threat. Some scouts have questioned whether he's a full-fledged wide receiver or not, and they want to see more than just the raw speed in 2025. But I think he has a big opportunity in front of him to elevate his game, so I'm excited to see what he adds to the LSU offense.
Okay. So we're going to pivot. LSU has 2 really good linebackers. Noah, would you like to tell everybody about them?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, defense has not been the strong suit at LSU over the last 6 seasons, really. I mean, since 2019, since that, that electric, beautiful season that was, defense has been a struggle. 2020 was bad. 2021 was bad. 2022 was decent. 23 was absolutely abysmal. And last year was improved, but still not where LSU needs to be from a defensive standpoint. But one thing you did see last season that should be a nice sight for LSU fans is the way Whit Weeks kind of stepped in and really dominated on defense. I think one of the notes I have on Weeks is he plays like his hair's on fire. I mean, he's a guy that is running around like a madman, which is a good thing. But also on top of that, it can cause for him to be kind of overly aggressive sometimes in kind of his pursuit and taking bad angles. But to me, that's also what makes him special. That's the reason he didn't play as much as a true freshman, was because he was a little bit overly aggressive. But he improved big time last season. I mean, he had 120 total tackles. He had a really good that big time interception against Arkansas, where he tips the ball up to himself and makes the grab. And he was just huge for LSU's defense last season. I think when you look at the best games that the LSU defense played last year, it was because of Whit Weeks. And I think Ole Miss is probably one to highlight, as well as Arkansas. Those were back-to-back weeks where the LSU defense kind of really showed out and made plays, and a lot of that was number 40. And then on Harold Perkins, obviously he is the biggest name on this defense, I would say. He has one of the higher ceilings, but there are a lot of question marks, a lot of it because of size. He came in as a true freshman and was dominant. Like you think back to the Arkansas game in 2022, I think LSU won 13-10, and Perkins had 3 forced fumbles and 5 sacks or something, like won that game almost single-handedly and really burst on the scene and was a dominant force his freshman season. As an off-ball linebacker, he was essentially a pass rusher his freshman year. He wanted to be that was an on-ball linebacker. He wanted to be an off-ball linebacker his second season, his sophomore year. And you just didn't see the same dynamic playmaking that you got from him his freshman year. Now, he looked really good in coverage. I can visibly still remember, I think it was a play against Missouri. He was in coverage on Luther Burden and made a great interception in the middle of the field when the LSU defense desperately needed something. And so he showed off his ability to play as an off-ball backer. But really what he is And I always thought he was more of a safety than he was a linebacker because he's just kind of in this tweener spot where you don't really know where he fits in. I don't think he's an edge rusher because he is smaller. And when teams are game planning for him, it's easy to kind of take him out of the game in that way. I think the reason he was such a good edge rusher his freshman season was because nobody knew who he was yet. I think he caught Lane Kiffin off guard in that Ole Miss game where LSU won. He did a great job as a QB spy against Bryce Young in that Alabama win in overtime. But as an edge rusher, he's just a little bit smaller. He's going to be playing what's called the star position in Blake Baker's defense this season, which is kind of like a safety linebacker hybrid. So really what they're going to do with him is just allow him to be an athlete. And I think that's his best attribute. And when it comes to draft day, in my opinion, the best thing for him is not going out there and overly performing, but it's just showing off your ability. You know, NFL coaches are some of the cockiest people on the planet. A defensive coordinator is going to see Harold Perkins and say, you know, that's a weapon that I can use, that I can make the most out of. And regardless of kind of specifically how he performs. But I think Harold Perkins and Whit Weeks are both in for a very, very big season. And if LSU's defense is improved and is successful, it's going to be because of those two guys.
So Owen is the defensive coordinator on the podcast. How would you use Harold Perkins, and tell us about the LSU linebackers?
Yeah, so specifically, I was a big fan of Harold Perkins. Obviously, he was an electrifying player as a true freshman. But even when he was more of that off-ball linebacker, coming from the Bills fandom, them having a fascination with undersized linebackers that will play in space, and having that be like my reference point for what I'm watching every Sunday. And I go and I watch Harold Perkins as a linebacker. He's somebody that I want on my team specifically, just because he is an electrifying athlete. He showed flashes of being a really good and strong coverage player because he's an instinctual football player. It's one of the things when I was at UB, I was the linebacker scouting intern for most of my time there. So I worked in hand in hand with the coordinator there, and I would get his notes specifically what he wanted. And one of the things was run and hit and instincts. Those are the big two things there. And that's the two things that kind of Harold Perkins really exemplifies. Like even the play that got him hurt against UCLA was him coming down on underneath coverage, making them get 5 yards and a headache as opposed to getting the deeper shot behind them and just laying into the receiver. Unfortunately, when he planted and hit, the shock of the hit broke his fibula or tibia, one of the bones in his leg, and dislocated his ankle. So that's what ended up ruining his season last year. But as someone who he's undersized, I think moving him to off-ball linebacker was the right decision because he's an electric pass rusher, sure, because he can bend and has explosiveness, but you want him to not be a target as a run defender. You'd rather him work in more space as a run defender as opposed to him being up on the line of scrimmage where teams are going to run pulling guards at him and down blocks and make him have to be the guy who sets a hard edge. If he's this weak side linebacker who can scrape over the top and use his range to come over through and lay some hits or scrape over the top of other D linemen and work in that space and shoot gaps, then that's where he's going to be the best. So if I'm going to be drafting him, I'm going to probably put him as an off-ball linebacker. He's 6'1", 220, has size to be one of those kind of weaker side linebackers in the NFL. And I want him to be in a system similar to like what I was saying with the Bills, where they're asking former safety convert to linebacker Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard, who are these guys who you would never in a million years ask to go come downhill and take on block, stack and shed and get off and make a tackle. You're asking them to work off of their D linemen who are shooting gaps and not two-gapping at all. They're shooting gaps, causing disruption, and then creating chaos with the blocking assignments and allowing the linebackers to sift through that and shoot those gaps for those plays. I think that's the kind of defensive system you're going to want for Perkins to excel in. And then on third downs, he can drop in coverage, but also that's when you can deploy and send him on pass rushing downs to be able to have him be your extra man if you want to crank up some pressure and bring him more of a five-man front, or even be more exotic and drop an edge and have still a four-man pass rush, but not lose any kind of juice off your edge there.
David, how about you? What do you have on the LSU linebackers?
Well, Perkins, I mean, he's like the wild card in LSU's deck this season. I mean, when he's unleashed as a blitzer or an off-ball rover, either way, he's been a weapon. His positional identity remains murky for sure. Some think he's too small to be a full-time edge. Others think he is too raw in coverage to be a traditional linebacker. But he's going to get drafted high based on his traits and splash plays alone. In my opinion, scheme fit will be everything for him. at the next level. Either way, he's going to be LSU's Swiss Army defender positional guy this season. Wit Weeks, high energy, sideline to sideline thumper, natural instincts. Sometimes he plays very fast. Sometimes he plays too fast. He needs to harness some of that chaos, but he'll prove that he can handle all of that. And at the next level, I think the biggest question mark. I think he's definitely headed in the right direction. The biggest question mark will just be if he's going to be the Mike or the Will.
And Dale, you want to take it home here on the two LSU linebackers?
Yeah, so Whit Weeks, true junior, 6'2", 228, the lower leg injury in the bowl game. As far as I know, I think he's going to be healthy to start the season, but that's just something to keep an eye on, make sure he's the same player he was for most of the season. But intense leader, the intensity just jumps off the page with his game. As you mentioned, hair on fire, Noah, like that is him. That is Whit Weeks. Considered a bit undersized. I'm not sure about his top end speed, but he's got the ability to diagnose quickly, the range to play sideline to sideline. And he also generated 19 pressures last year. So I don't even think he was asked to do that a lot, but when he was able to get pressure on the quarterback. So he's just a guy who has pretty much a complete skill set at linebacker. I've got him as a day two guy and not a lot of questions that I think he'll translate and be a really good pro. But the other linebacker, on the other hand, I have about a million questions about what positions he going to play. Is he going to stay healthy? There's just so many things with Harold Perkins that are just unclear right now. He's also undersized, but I mean, he's a guy who's going to give it his all, play with a lot of intensity. He's a great athlete. I mean, as a guy, former running back in high school. So I like both players. Harold Perkins, just a bigger question mark on can he stay healthy? What position does he play? I think he needs some work as a run defender if he's an off-ball linebacker / star player. And still they need to utilize him as a pass rusher because we've seen how special he was a true freshman doing it. But that's not going to be his full-time role, but just something he can do on occasion.
Okay, so Owen, question for you. We covered Georgia last week. We covered LSU this week. We had two Georgia linebackers everybody in the podcast liked. We have two linebackers for LSU that everybody liked. And then we have this question from Pork Chop. So which linebacker room do you like better, Georgia or LSU? It's a loaded question. And then feel free to take Pork Chop's comment here.
Yeah, I think it all depends on how Perkins fits into his system because, I think the highs of Perkins' game we've seen with him in college, if he's back to that again, I mean, being as electrifying and as explosive and his splash play player he was his true freshman year, but also now at the star position, I think you have to lean towards LSU because Weeks is also someone who can be a day two type player who is more of that. He runs around, able to take on blocks. He's more of a complement to Perkins, and I think if Perkins can find that right role to really showcase his abilities, I think I would have to go with the LSU linebacker room. Georgia's, I think, is maybe a safer bet because there's less question marks, specifically because Perkins is one of the biggest question marks in his entire draft class. But for me, for someone who is imagining how I would deploy both of the LSU linebackers and just kind of the potential that Perkins is oozing with, I think I'm going to have to go with LSU's room right now in the summer of 2025, projecting them for the upcoming season. But if you ask me this question again in January when it comes closer to the draft and we have the last season in the rearview mirror, I think that's going to be it. It's more likely not going to be the Georgia guys if Perkins doesn't live up to that specific hype.
Okay, I'll have to take some notes and remember to ask you in 6 months.
And then the question with Jalen Walker, I really like this question specifically because that's where I see him working the best. If he was able to play that exact same role that they had Walker play. Now, Walker played a bit more power and had some more girth to his frame. He was more up to the 240s range, 235 range when he was playing at Georgia. I can definitely see that's the archetype I think they need to run with Perkins. Kind of like what I was talking about, where he is a mix between having an edge because he can play up on line of scrimmage. He has experience doing that, has the athleticism, bend, and explosiveness to do so, but if he's the one who's going to be anchoring down and being that point of attack defender against the run in like an even front, he's going to get his ass kicked. Like it's not going to be something that you want him to do consistently. So if you can find a good blend of him being an off-ball linebacker for run obvious downs and then splash him in where you can roll him up and have him be more of a pass rusher it may create even more questions like we had with Jalen Walker this past season, where it's like, what's his true position in the NFL? But you also saw Jalen Walker be a dominant defensive player in college football. And I think if you deploy Perkins in a similar way, you could probably minimize his deficiencies physically while maximizing what he does talent-wise.
Okay, so David, same question to you. The Georgia linebackers or the LSU linebackers?
I would probably give the edge right now to LSU, but it all comes down to Perkins, like Owen said. I mean, if he plays his potential and if he is used to answer the other question in the Jalen Walker role, Jalen Walker's role evolved during his time at Georgia. He made an impact as a pass rusher and then expanded his, responsibilities to being a linebacker. And some people have seen that, as far as in the draft, as in the past, as having that type of versatility to play multiple positions without like having a home was seen as a bad thing, but it is now considered a major strength. And I think you saw that in the last draft. I don't remember where he went. What was it, top 20? I can't remember where he was selected, but I think the game has evolved and changed. And I mean, if you put on the tape like Walker versus, I think it was Texas, he had like 3 sacks, 7 tackles. I mean, they utilized him in the right way that whole game, and he was just eating people alive. And if they can do that at LSU with Perkins, if he can find that balance in the way that Georgia did with Walker, I think they run away with that linebacking core being better than almost anybody in the nation.
Yeah, and Dale, you want to weigh in on the Georgia versus LSU linebacker discussion?
I would slightly lean Georgia just because of the questions with Perkins, and I'm really high on CJ Allen, and also once we covered Georgia last week, and that was really my first opportunity to watch more Raylan Wilson. I really like both of those guys, and I think there's a ton of upside. But I don't think you can go wrong with either linebacker core. But it'll be a fun conversation to have, halfway through the season even to see which one of those groups is living up to expectations.
So between Georgia and LSU, do we think all 4 linebackers are top 50 players? Is Whit Weeks a top 50?
I think the 2 LSU guys would definitely be, for me. Okay, Perkins right now for me is a late day 2 player. I think he's definitely top 100, just based off what he showed already previously in his college career. And even though like him being an off-ball linebacker hasn't been up to those same standards, he's still a top 100 player for me when it comes to being in that position. Top 50, if he can, like we're talking about, have that kind of season, then yes, I think Weeks, it has a cleaner projection to being pushing for that top 50 spot. And then I think the Georgia guys, both of them, both having the floor they've already established themselves and plus having that ceiling, I think they both too can also be top 50. Now that's hard to get 4 linebackers in the top 50, true off-ball linebackers, but we'll see what happens.
Top 50 talents. I don't know if they'll all go in the top 50, right? They all have top 50 potential.
Yeah. So I think it's stacking up to be a really good linebacker class. That's just me. From wherever this seat is, the view from the cheap seats is really good.
Well, Alabama's linebackers are really good too. Like SEC linebackers, and then I'll toss my Ohio State guy, Sonny Styles, in there. It is. There's a ton of good linebackers. Torian York, Amari Campbell, list goes on and on.
We even covered some on this show. Like last week with Oklahoma, we covered Omasigo, who could be a guy who projects into the day 2 conversation. We've talked about previously Wade Woodaz from Clemson. Even when I jumped over to Wednesdays and hopped on the Indiana podcast, we talked about I'm pulling up his name right now. Aiden Fisher was a guy who I thought could be an early day 3 type player, and he could eventually progress into maybe a day 2 type player if he has an outstanding season for an Indiana defense that looks to have a ton of players on it. So I think there's a lot of guys that can be battling for that top 100, top 50 kind of conversation. It's the absolute antithesis to the linebacker core we had last year, where it was like 1 or 2 guys are worth top 50 picks and the rest of them are battling out to get drafted on day 3.
Okay, we are going to pivot. We have a couple of more, what we're saying we had 16 LSU players. We divided them into a top 8 and then the others. So 2 guys remain in the top 8. Cornerback Mansour Delane, edge Patrick Payton. Noah, you want to talk about each of them a little bit?
Yeah, Mansour Delane is somebody that LSU is expecting to come in my opinion, right now, he has the cornerback one spot locked up. Like coming out of spring, after watching him at spring practice and in the spring game, I thought it was very obvious he's going to be LSU's cornerback one. And he's very, very smart. He's a savvy football player. He's played a lot of football coming into LSU, obviously a transfer from Virginia Tech. And kind of like we talked about the offensive line, the defensive back core is very young as well for LSU. Like I said, there were some rough defenses, especially 2023. LSU, cut ties with that entire defensive staff and had a factory reset, bringing in Blake Baker, Corey Raymond, Jake Olson, and some guys. So they have a young defensive back room, and so they went out. They got a guy like Mansour Delane who's going to be a plug-and-play player. He's not an overly like ball hawk type of corner. Like he's not going to be, he has, I think his most interceptions on the year were 4 in last season at Virginia Tech. He doesn't have these crazy athletic ability, this top end speed, but he's very good against the run. He's a good tackler. He is good in coverage. He is a smart football player, and he's going to come in and answer a lot of questions for LSU. And then Patrick Payton is a guy. I think he was, one of the top. I think Delane was one of the top corners in the portal. Payton was one of the top edge rushers in the portal. And LSU didn't bring Patrick Payton in as a depth piece. Like he's not somebody that they went out and got just to have a rotational guy at edge rusher. They brought him in to be a guy, like to play edge and go get the quarterback. He obviously had a very good season, I think in 2023 at Florida State, where he had 7 sacks and was able to get to the quarterback a little bit better than he did last season. He's got really good speed. He's got a good pass rushing ability, but he's not very physical. He's not a power rusher. He's much more finesse, and he's got to work on being able to finish. He's not the greatest tackler, so he's able to get past his block or get off his block. If the run is there, he's not the best at wrapping it up and killing the play there. But I think the expectation for Patrick Payton is to be the guy at edge rusher for LSU. And I think a lot of the reason is because when you look back at Harold Perkins' freshman year, a lot of the things with this LSU defense are built around Harold Perkins. Like every move they made, everything they do are built around him because of how dynamic he is. That freshman year for Perk, he had a guy named B.J. Ojolari on the offensive line as an edge rusher. I mean, the defensive line as an edge rusher. That was the guy that was being game planned for. And so far, really since then, last year with Swinson was a very good edge rusher as well, and it kind of allowed Perk to play, have less pressure on him. I think that's why they bring a guy like Patrick Payton in, is to come in, alleviate some of that pressure. So if he has the season that LSU is expecting him to have, it could be very, very good.
So Dale, what do you have on Delane and Payton?
Yeah, I'll start with Payton. So 6'5", 250, redshirt senior. You mentioned transfer from Florida State. Didn't have the best season last year, but 2023, I really liked him. He's got all the traits you want. There's almost some similarities with like Princely Umanmielen to me. Maybe not the most powerful guy, but he's got the length, the explosiveness, the pure athleticism as a pass rusher. You mentioned the tackle, 25% missed tackle rate. Got to do better finishing, things like that. I've got him as a 3rd, 4th round guy. I think that he can get back to that form. I think he'll do well at LSU. But last season was definitely not a good season for him. But they definitely brought him in to be like probably the guy. They also brought in Jack Pyborn from Florida as another edge player. I don't know that he'll be as explosive type of guy, but we may mention him a little later. For Delane, transferred from Virginia Tech, 6'1", 180. I just think he's a complete corner. I thought he could have been day 2 last year. It kind of surprised me. He went back to school, and obviously he's transferring to LSU from Virginia Tech. Very, very competitive at the catch point. Very physical. He'll come up and hit. I mean, he will hit. I love the way he will come up and attack the run game. He's a little grabby down the field, almost overly physical in coverage at times, but he's a sticky cover corner that is very physical. And I think he's day 2 all day long, and with a good season could make his way into day 1 conversation.
David, what do you have in Patrick Payton and Mansour Delane?
On Peyton, I think most of it's been covered. I mean, his first step is NFL caliber. His play strength and anchor needs a little more developing, but if he adds weight and holds the edge better, he's going to, be a pretty solid pick. If he doesn't develop the game more, he could risk being a pass rushing specialist. But overall, I'm a fan of him. As far as Delane, I've watched him closely for a couple of years covering Virginia Tech. The ceiling that Tech once promised never quite arrived. So Delane made the business decision to transfer to LSU. In my opinion, he has SEC-ready size, competitive toughness. He's sometimes been feast or famine in press coverage, but his flashes are undeniable. He frustrated ACC wideouts, blanketed routes, provided sticky man coverage. He wasn't targeted a high amount, but he's going to be tested a lot more in 2025 at LSU. As of today, I think he has the ability and the tape already there to be a high pick. I think Dale said he already had him like his day 2 guy. If he proves, at the next level, which is what he wanted to do, he gambled on himself by doing this. I mean, he could make it to round 1. As of today, just sitting here, he could be, round 2, round 1. It's just a matter of what teams trust the ceiling more than they fear his floor.
And Owen, you want to finish it off on those 2 players?
Yeah, I mean, you guys covered Mansour pretty good, pretty well. I think the word I would describe him as is aggressive, overly so. Like, he is aggressive to the point where you love it. Like, he is attacking receivers. He was in Virginia Tech's zone-heavy system, but when he was asked to come up and play press and play man, he showed athleticism and hip fluidity to come up and do that and be playing receivers' faces. He's 6 foot, probably somewhere sub 190, around the 180, 185 range. So it's, even though he's super aggressive, he isn't the biggest guy. He likes to come up and attack the run, but I think that's where the biggest question mark is going to be, especially when we get towards combine time, is like, what's he going to weigh in at? What's his height going to be at? What's his true size going to be? I think for his interception production, it's very Jahdae Barron-esque, where he got some production and showed off some good hands, but a lot of the plays he made were all results of bad quarterback throws or not really him going up making a play that I can really attribute most of that to him. It was a lot of production from factors outside of him. But for someone who's that aggressive, you want to have that and then rein them in while also showing the technique he's shown both in man and zone. So I do like him a lot. I definitely do think he's already a day 2 player. And then with Patrick Payton, he's a weirdly built cat. Like, he's long and limby. Like, he's got super long arms, which has some power in his hands, but his frame is very lean, and he looks it was such an odd build. Like, you see him be 6'5", 250, and I've seen other DNs be 6'5", 250 and look a lot more filled out and packed in than he is. He looks really kind of thinned out. I think maybe if you could possibly add some more in his lowers, it'll be better. I think that's where my biggest drawback on him for me is that I love how much power he has in his hands and how he can use that as weapons to be a pass rusher. But for him to be probably likely be a weak side, even front end, he's going to need to be able to hold up when he's on the line of scrimmage in run defending, when blockers can get into his body more and be able to hunker down and anchor. Because right now he's so thinned out, I don't think that's really a possibility for him. He was getting moved around by tight ends, especially in that last year at Florida State. He was getting moved around a bit too much for my liking. But when you're looking at just the pass rush reps, especially back in 2023, where he was able to use that long arm and having that freakish length really go into play for him, I think you can definitely see at the floor basis, a designated pass rusher who has a good toolkit right now, can add a few more pass rushing counters to that to work off that power in his hands. And if you can add more girth and more density to his frame, maybe get up to 260, really fill in that 6'5" frame, I think he's someone that could definitely have a lot of upward mobility, especially as the number 1 that can take some compliment off of Harold Perkins.
So let's pause for a quick commercial. We've covered the top 8 LSU players. We still have several more to cover. But Dale, do you want to let everybody know who you are and how they can find all of your other content?
Yeah, my name's Dale. Have a show called Bengals and Brews. We're usually live Mondays and Fridays at 3:30 p.m. We've been doing Wednesday shows with our good buddy who also does stuff here on the Mrs. Our Relevant podcast, where we're doing some summer scouting, different positions. This Wednesday at 4:00, we will be covering wide receivers. So that'll be fun.
Cool. David.
I cover the Philadelphia Eagles for Philly Sports Network and Metro Philadelphia newspaper. You can follow everything I do at PHL Eagle News. And if you don't like the Eagles, you can always go to my website at phillycovercorner.com. I have a lot of analytics for all 32 NFL teams, including, draft tendencies, GM tendencies, etc. Just avoid the Eagle stuff and click the analytics button at the top, and you can bypass all the Philly nonsense that you don't want to see.
Owen.
Yeah, you could find me here on Mondays and Wednesdays for the rest of the summer, and then when we get towards the season, I'll be on the Mr. Relevant on Wednesdays, scouting defensive line, both edge and D tackles. Right now, I have content going up on my own personal YouTube channel over at Weekly Huddle. Similar to Dale, I'm working with Newt, who is usually my co-hosting buddy on Wednesdays, but he's also been putting up his summer scouting top 10s per positions. This week alone, I have a publishing schedule. I've been really dragging my feet on some editing stuff, but I have Newt's top 10 interior offensive linemen coming out tomorrow. Wednesday will be a 2026 mock draft that me and Bill Sparks, another draft professor, did after I went through and predicted every game of the season. So you can check out as early of a 2026 mock draft as you can get in July of 25. So I have that going up. And as well as I also have Newt's top 10 interior defensive linemen on deck, probably either coming out later this week or early next week. And as well, I have the first episode of my series where I'm going through and covering notable draft busts and or steals, where I go through, break down the film, give a little film study, talking about whether or not it was deserved, if they were picked, where they were picked, and why, if it was their career trajectory or was something on film that could show us why they ended up turning out the way they did. So that's coming out again later this week on Friday.
Thank you. No. Welcome to Draft Professor. Would you like to introduce yourself to everybody watching? Tell them what you do, and floor is yours.
Yeah, my name's Noah Tingle. I'm the host of the Tingle & Co. podcast. It is every morning, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 a.m., a daily show based on YouTube, but it's also put out anywhere you find your podcasts. We talk mostly LSU football, but we cover LSU in totality, LSU football, LSU baseball, LSU men's and women's basketball, everything. We cover it all. And we also will touch on, the Saints and the Pelicans and some of the other Louisiana sports, but it's mostly centered around LSU and more specifically LSU football. So we go live from our YouTube channel, Tingle & Co., Monday through Friday from 7 to 9 a.m. It's me and my partner, Lloyd Courtney, as we've been in the business for about 5 years doing this, and then kind of just got our own thing underway a couple of months ago and have been rolling ever since. So,
well, welcome.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So you can follow the channel for Draft Professor at NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. It's the same on X as it is on YouTube. The best thank you can give is to hit the subscribe on YouTube, please and thank you. What you're going to get with this channel is daily draft content. So we are just warming up right now. We started our week yesterday. We had top 20 wide receivers with Jack Brentnall. We're doing LSU today. We are doing Arizona State tomorrow. We are doing Michigan on Wednesday. We are doing Miami on Thursday. We are doing quarterbacks on Friday. And then on Sunday, we've got a whole new lineup, and that's just going to repeat each week. Couple things you should be looking out for. We have Ian Cummings and Dalton Miller coming on our podcast to do their top 20 corners. So if you see Dalton Miller tweeting about corners, it's because he's prepping for the corner episode with us. He told me he didn't have 20 corners yet. So you'll see them. You will see Devin Jackson and Jacob Infante coming on the channel to go over their top 50s. So that podcast is also scheduled. So James Foster has agreed to come on the channel to do scouting reports in the fall. So daily draft content. Some of the people already. We could not do this without Owen, David, and Dale showing up once a week, right? There are 22 podcasters at the Draft Professor that show up once a week. Every once in a while, we get a sicko like Owen who shows up twice a week. But I couldn't do this without all of the podcasters around. So, much appreciative to, Dale, David, Owen for doing these with us every Monday. And that being said, we still have a lot of players to go through for LSU. So I'm going to name some of the players we haven't talked about yet. Center Braylon Moore, linebacker or edge Jamari Butler, safety Javian Taviano, cornerback Jakeem Jackson, safety A.J. Halsey, running back Caleb Jackson, corner Ashton Stamps. Give me a second. Scrolling through the list. Jack Pyburn at edge. And there was a left tackle that I'm looking for the name.
Tyree Adams, redshirt sophomore.
Thank you, Tyree Adams at tackle. So out of all those players, Dale, anybody that jumped out at you on the tape?
I like Ashton Stamps, 6 foot 190, true junior. He may be more of a 2027 guy, but good athlete. Needs to get his head around quicker on deep passes. But overall, his ball skills are pretty good. Had 14 passes defense last year, which was, I think, leading in the SEC. Is susceptible to double moves. There's a really bad one versus Ryan Williams in Alabama that most people, if you're an LSU fan, probably remember. But I think he could be a day two type of player. May not be in 2026, maybe in 2027. But he's probably my favorite of the best of the rest guys here.
David, anybody else that you'd like?
Yeah, I like Stamps a lot. I also like AJ Halsey. Is that how you pronounce his last name? He's a real, tone setter in the secondary. He's a little undersized to some, but he's instinctive. He flies around the field. He brings the wood when he hits you. He might be small for some team safety prototypes, but he's a film room favorite if you are a film junkie, with special teams value, and he's extremely draftable, but will be fit dependent.
And Owen, how about you? Anybody jump off on tape?
I'm really excited, and this is going to be more of a projection than anything, but with Caleb Jackson, the running back there, he's 6 foot, 235, built really well. I think he might be someone that is going to benefit from getting some more touches this year and maybe project to be more of a 2027 player. Maybe this be more of the ramp-up year, and then the year after that will be his big year where he gets the majority of the touches in the offense. But for right now, a guy who has that amount of size is relatively fresh, only had 44 attempts last year and 31 attempts the year before that, but still had just under 200 yards, 150 and 165 per. I do think he's a guy who can definitely explore some more of these touches that are going to be available in this LSU offense, especially with how much wide receiver depth they've had. There's going to be a lot of spread, and you have a guy who's that size who has shown some juice on tape that you're going to be able to come out in there and be kind of more of a wrecking ball and be more of a thunder to the lightning of that offense. So he's somebody I'm really looking forward to seeing this year.
So Noah, being the resident LSU fan / expert, go ahead and give us your summary or any players that you want to mention that haven't been brought up yet.
Yeah, I can kind of give the rundown. I mean, I like what everybody said. Ashton Stamps, to me, he was a guy, he was a 3-star out of high school, so not this big-time recruit that LSU went out and got. He was a Rummel Raider, which is a school out here in New Orleans. I don't know if y'all remember Christian Fulton from a couple of years ago, was a really good corner from Rummel that ended up obviously being a massive part of that 2019 team, and then got drafted early on, I think, to the Titans. But Ashton Stamps is a guy that came in and really impressed and kind of surprised a lot of the staff when he got here as a freshman. Got some good opportunities in some big games down the line that year because of some injuries and some other things that happened in the defensive back room, and then obviously got the opportunity to kind of be cornerback one, so to say, last season when Zy Alexander was down at the start of the year. He obviously came back and was the number one guy on the outside, but Stamps got a lot of really good reps. I think there's some really good film that you can kind of pick out from last season. I vividly remember I was in Las Vegas for that very upsetting loss to USC, but there was one play where he just didn't give up. He got his head around, kind of missed the ball initially. The receiver got it, and he used his hands to break that pass up. And I think he's a guy. I agree. I don't think he'll be a 2026 guy. I think he'll be a 2027 draft guy. And same with Caleb Jackson. Caleb Jackson is an absolute monster. I mean, seeing him in person is like something of to marvel at. I mean, he's a freak. Like, I mean, 6 foot, 235, and he is all of it. Like, he is put together. He's a guy that's a relatively young football player. He's not somebody that played a lot of football growing up. He played at Liberty High School here in Baton Rouge. And to me, the biggest thing with Caleb, and part of the reason why he didn't get as much of an opportunity last season was because, one, Josh Williams was a guy that was a very, very good and trusted running back, and then the surge that was Caden Durham last season. But Caleb Jackson, to me, kind of struggles to find holes. His vision is something that I would like to see improve a lot. He's a very good, like, decisive running back. When he sees one cut that needs to be made, he can make that one cut, get downhill, and run somebody over. But his vision is something that does need some help. He struggled to kind of find the holes last season. But I think he's going to have a real opportunity to go out and make plays because Josh Williams is gone. A guy that was a part of LSU for I think like 7 years, ended up leaving with his master's when he headed to, I think he was an undrafted free agent to the Bucks. But he's going to have a real opportunity to like they said, be the thunder to the lightning that is Caden Durham, because Caden Durham is a track star. And Caleb Jackson is going to be the older guy. They need somebody that can trust in pass protection, and I think that's a way for Caleb to kind of get more of an opportunity is to become really good in the pass game as a blocker and a receiver. So that's what I really want to see from him going into this season. But my favorite, kind of like I think Ryan Sparks said, AJ Halsey, as well as David. AJ Halsey, to me, when LSU got him out of the transfer portal from Houston, I was very, very excited because he is kind of what this LSU defense has been missing in the rough years the last couple of seasons. They have not had very good safety play in general, but especially not somebody that plays as well against the run as AJ Halsey does. I mean, he is very good near the line of scrimmage. He's also good in the passing game. I mean, he had what I think 5 interceptions last season and was able to really play the passing lanes well. But the top end speed and the size can be a concern, and he can also be over aggressive a little bit as well. But I think that's kind of a theme with this LSU defense. When you think of Whit Weeks, Mansour Delane, Patrick Payton, AJ Halsey, like this LSU defense is going to want to create havoc. And I think Halsey fits that well. And I think he's going to be a riser on this defense that not a lot of people are talking about now, that as the season kind of rolls on, he could be in the conversation as one of the best defensive players on this team because of the role he's going to fill. Jakeem Jackson at corner is a guy who has not played a lot of football up to this point at Florida. He was a Corey Raymond commit there. Obviously, Raymond makes his way from Florida back to LSU, and Raymond brings Jakeem Jackson with him. But Jakeem is a very confident corner. He's confident in his instincts. He's good in press coverage. He is a fluid athlete and can anticipate really well. But he has to work on tackling and being able to play and run support. But I think he's going to have an opportunity to kind of fight for that cornerback spot across from Mansour Delane. That's one of the bigger kind of talking points right now for LSU is who is going to be cornerback 2 across from Mansour Delane. To me, he's the only corner with their job locked up right now. I think right now with Jackson, Stamps, and then true freshman DJ Pickett, those are the 3 guys that are kind of up in the discussion for playing that other corner spot, and who gets a lot of those reps is something to be looking at as the season goes on. And then Javian Toviano, he's 6'1", 201. My first word that I have on him is fearless. I vividly remember, one, he was a big recruiting get for LSU at the cornerback spot out of high school. And then he got an opportunity to play early along with Stamps their freshman year. And I vividly remember against Alabama in 23, Toviano going one-on-one with Jalen Milroe, which ultimately didn't end well for him. I think Milroe put him on his back, but as a true freshman, he was willing to go heads up with one of the most dominant running quarterbacks we've seen over the last decade. And the biggest thing with him right now is they have not really found a spot for him. He came in as just a DB. They've played him at corner. They've played him at safety, then back to corner, and then star, and then now he's back at safety. So he's going to be one of those guys to kind of be on the lookout for on just where he lands position-wise. But I think he's a very good football player. He needs to work on being able to play in coverage, but he's very good in run support. He's a good tackler. He played very well in that bowl game against Baylor. And then the last two, Jamari Butler, he's a edge rusher / linebacker. I think LSU is going to use him at edge. And I'm very interested to see kind of where he fits in because he is strong. He's a good tackler, and he's got some potential in the pass rush. But that room for LSU with two guys like Patrick Payton and then Gabe Relaford, who's a younger guy who I think is going to be a very, very good edge rusher for LSU. It's going to be interesting to see where Butler fits in, but I think he's going to have a role on this team, along with Pyburn, who I think is going to he's really stepped up as a leader from everything I've heard. He's one of LSU has 10 packed leaders, so it's kind of these 10 teams to make sure everybody's being held accountable and doing things right. Pyburn is a transfer who has stepped in and already become one of those 10 leaders. And so he's a guy that's obviously got the leadership qualities, stepped in, has come in and has been vocal right away, and really kind of meshed well as being a transfer. And then Braylon Moore is a guy that is a little undersized from LSU standards. Brad Davis, the offensive line coach at LSU, likes bigger offensive linemen, like Tyree Adams, who we're going to talk about in a second, is a very, very large man at left tackle. Brad Davis usually likes bigger guys. Braylon Moore's about 6'2", 300. But we talk about the youth on the O-line. Moore is part of that transfer portal class along with Thompson of experienced guy. And to me, the biggest reason why they went out and got Moore is because when you look at last season, DJ Chester was the starting center for LSU all year. There were some struggles offensively from a communication standpoint, a protection standpoint, and a lot of that was because of how much was on Garrett Nussmeier's shoulders, where you saw some delay of games or having to burn timeouts or snap infractions or false starts. Like that was a real issue on the O-line last season. And to me, a lot of that was because there was a redshirt sophomore or a redshirt freshman actually at center. And you bring in an older guy to come in and have his way and be able to lead. And I think that's why they got Braylon Moore to take some of that off of Nussmeier's shoulders and kind of lead that offensive line. So,
yeah. So Owen, did you want to ask something to Noah?
Oh yeah. So no, I know. Here, you can take a second to catch your breath there while I'll set this up real quick. But for in the past, we've seen between like Stingley, Perkins, even Jamar Chase to an extent with him breaking out as a younger guy, and then we had to wait a year for him to come out because of COVID. Is there a guy of these freshmen or maybe true sophomores or maybe even redshirt freshmen that we haven't really seen a ton of yet that you could see really emerging as a player here that's one of those guys that we're going to have to be on the lookout for? Like, okay, this is a guy that popped off for LSU again, but we have to wait 1 to 2 more years before he's even draft eligible before he can come out, similar to what Stingley, Perkins, and even Chase to an extent did. So is there a guy in this either freshman recruiting class or someone who hasn't really gotten an opportunity yet but is still young and a ways away from being eligible for draft eligibility that you really like to see step in as like a starter type player?
Yeah, I think first off, DJ Pickett, true freshman. He was the number 1 corner out of high school last season. He is long and rangy, but has very, very good top end speed. And he's a guy, in my opinion, he's going to be very hard for LSU to keep off the field. Brian Kelly has not always been the biggest advocate for putting freshmen out there early on. You saw Harold Perkins really didn't break out until later down the line his freshman season. But Pickett's going to be very hard to keep off the field because they need some defensive back help. And he's just so extremely talented as a cover corner. He's long, like he's got a very long wingspan. He does need to bulk up a little bit. He is a little bit on the skinnier side but he's got great top end speed and is special in coverage. And then there's a guy that played a good bit last season, and you saw him, but he's going to be kind of ushered into a bigger role this season. Trades Green is, I think, somebody that is going to have a big role on this team, and then he's going to be a true sophomore next year. And then down the line, when it comes to kind of draft day for him after his junior season or wherever, he's a guy that's going to test off the charts. He was a top basketball recruit in high school, actually suited up for LSU in basketball last season, playing both football and basketball. Now he's strictly committed to football, playing tight end. He's more of a receiving tight end. He's not an inline blocker in any way, but it is something he's focused on working on. And I think he's going to be a huge piece of this offense. And when he starts to test for the NFL draft, his numbers are going to be off the charts. So I would say DJ Pickett as a true freshman, and then Trades Green as a true sophomore, the guys to kind of keep your eye on.
And if you're looking for more college recruiting information, a couple of the draft professors actually do high school to NFL draft. That's their cycle. So that's Home Squad Sports. Ironically, Dale, did you know that there's a 7v7 tournament in Cincinnati this week?
I don't think I did. No.
Yeah, so Home Squad Sports is actually visiting Cincinnati. So I think they're in Kentucky, like Lexington. But a couple of the draft professors actually do all like prep recruiting all the way through college. So that, like, that's their like life cycle. So there's a high school 7v7 tournament that I'm actually going to on Thursday. So but we have been at this for 75 minutes, and I think we could keep going. But for sanity's sake, we are going to close down the podcast. For Dale, David, Owen, special guest Noah, thank you very much. For the 80 podcasters at the Draft Professor, thank you for watching, everybody. We'll see you on a podcast again tomorrow.